there are many things that AI can do, and there are many things AI does very well, and we have talked about capabilities and what we can do, but it's important that we also understand some of the limitations of AI. Some of these are potentially limitations that might go away soon as AI gets better and better. Others might be more permanent, but it is important to just have some basic understanding of some limitations of AI to avoid using AI in ways where you get outputs that you believe to be good that turn out to not be so good. Right? So the first thing we need to do, we've mentioned very briefly, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more now, is something called the context window. Right? So while an AI model is trained on roughly all the information on the internet, right, and while they're able to sort of ingest a lot more information, there's a limit to how much they can, say, keep in their head at the same time. A little bit like us humans, like we know a lot more things than we can think of right now. Right? And what happens when you're working with an AI and you give it more information than it can fit in its context window, like you give it a higher number of tokens than what it can process, is that it will no longer give accurate answers. Right? Typically, this happens because it literally no longer knows the beginning of the conversation. It only knows the last part, however much fits into its context window. Right? And this is why, with the exception of Gemini, with its 1 million token context window, most other tools, while they might have the ability to interpret a video file, it would have to be a very short file, because otherwise it will fill up their context window and they will start making mistakes. It's also why you can give other AI tools, a few hundred pages of text here and there, but not thousands and thousands of pages. Now, it used to be with earlier AI models that these context windows were very small. Like the original ChatGPT, you could only give it about 12 pages. So after 12 pages of text or so, it no longer had any clue why this conversation started. And it also did not know that it didn't know. Right? So these problems were sort of gradually getting better, but they're very much still there, and it's something to be aware of, is to make sure that you don't give an AI tool more information than what it can deal with. Right? The next limitation we need to talk about is bias. Right? So all AI models, like we've talked about before, have been trained on a whole lot of information, and they sort of developed, let's say, a reality or a worldview based on that information. So any bias that was present in that information will be reflected by this AI. Right? Now, the easiest way to think about this is by focusing on image models. Right? Early image models, by image models I mean models where you use them to generate images. Right? You describe something in text and it gives you an image. Early image models were terribly biased. For example, if you asked one of the first image models to generate an image of an attorney or a lawyer, if you did this 100 times, it would give you 100 images of a white man in a very nice suit with a briefcase, right? Because in its training, remember the tokens and the probability, it always knew that the most likely output here would be, in that case, a white man in a very nice suit holding a briefcase, right? So that's an example of bias. Right? Now, in most cases, the developers behind these programs have created sort of guardrails and other parts of the instruction to help the AI tools be aware of bias and to try to avoid it, but it is still very much there. Right? And you can imagine this from the point of view of someone outside of the US, the fact that almost all AI models are trained mostly on information that is written in English and mostly then coming from the US, other English-speaking countries, and Western Europe, right? So you can see that you can see why that would potentially be a bias compared to others. So we need to be aware that these AI models are incredibly intelligent, but they are trained on data sets created by humans, and they can very much display bias. So far, it looks like in most cases, they are less biased than humans, but that still leaves room for improvement. Which leads us to our next limitation, which is something called hallucinations, right? Sometimes an AI model would just plain old do something that's completely wrong, right? Right in the middle of something that's beautifully written and perfectly good, suddenly you see something there and say, wait, this is just absolutely not true. This is false, right? So we call that a hallucination. Right? It's just sort of a mix-up of reality that isn't there. A lot of people like to talk a lot about this, and there's a lot of people saying, well, I can't use AI tools because, it just hallucinates. It makes mistakes. There are errors. You can't use this stuff. Yeah, to some degree, early AI models made a lot of these. The more recent ones, not so much. Like at this point, the top AI models sort of hallucination rate is sort of in the less than 1% range. And I can tell you, if I do 100 things, I would find it incredibly unlikely that I don't make at least one mistake. And I think most humans at this point have a higher error rate than most of the best AI models. But we still need to keep in mind that everything that comes out of an AI model is not necessarily correct. And we need to think about best practices for how we can avoid that. And the most typical one, which we'll discuss in more detail later, is to always work with more than one AI model, or at the very least, ask the same model to do the same thing more than one time, right? So if I use AI to something, let's say something that has where the output is a short, definitive answer to something, and I ask both Gemini and Claude and ChatGPT for the same thing, and I get the same answer, then I am very satisfied, because I can then, with very high likelihood, consider this to be accurate. While if I'd only done it with one, I would have to do a little bit of extra checking to make sure there were no hallucinations. Right? Next limitation is something called the training cutoff. Right? So we know how all these models are trained on data. Well, all this training happened at some point of time, and then it ends. Right? So an AI model that is trained will be trained on all the data from before that, but it does not know anything that has happened after that. Right? Now, this used to be a bigger problem, because they used to be like the training cutoff could be 2-3 years before the day the model was launched. These cycles have shortened significantly. The models that were released in May of 2025 typically had training cutoffs of January 2025, so it's only a few months. Right? Anything that happens after that, any information about anything that has happened after that, the AI model can only find through retrieving information from the internet or from information given by you. Right? Now, it used to be a bigger problem, again, because it used to be that they wouldn't be aware of this. Right? That the model would not be aware of the fact that it didn't know what had happened in the last year or so. Now they know to go out and find the information. They know to tell you that they do not know, and they have to go out and find the information and then sort of work from there. But still, it leads to some interesting things, such as the fact that your typical AI model is not aware of itself. Right? If you typically ask a ChatGPT model, what is the strongest, best, most intelligent current ChatGPT model, it will typically tell you it's the one before it, right? So sort of keeping in mind that there's a difference between anything that it knows from before its training and anything that you sort of help it find out about after. One more limitation, and you might not think this is a limitation, but it is. AI models aim to please. They're literally programmed to help you. They are aware that you are the person they are engaging with. And when you're asking them to do something, they want to please you, which is often good, but not always. So a good example here is, let's say that you are working on a cover letter. You're going to apply to an internship, right? You give the AI your resume, you give it the job listing, and you give it the cover letter that you wrote. And then you ask for feedback on it. And you will most likely get a lot of good feedback. But it will most likely be a little bit on the positive side. Be like, this is good. This is very good. Maybe make a little change here. At some point you'll be ready to say, okay, is this ready? Am I ready to submit this? Is this as good as it's gonna get? And it'll be like, 2 thumbs up, you're good, excellent. Right? That might be true, but it probably isn't. Because it aims to please, and it knows that the way it pleases you is by saying you did a good job. The way to get around this, of course, is to role play. Right? The way to get around it is for you to be on the other side of the table. Create a new chat, give it the same information and say, I am hiring for this internship. Here is the job listing. This is an application we got from someone. This is their resume. This is the cover letter. Help me review this application and decide. And you'll probably find that it is a lot more critical than it was when it was trying to please the person who wrote the letter, because now it's trying to please the person who's making a decision based on the letter. So this is something we need to be aware of. Next, work in progress. All these AI models, as you probably have noticed, are very much a work in progress. They change all the time. It could be multiple changes in a week. They certainly change completely every second or third month or so. Functions are added and removed and rules are changed. We're not really used to working with software that works this way, right? So they make mistakes, things break, they do things now they didn't do last year. It's hard to plan sort of a workflow if you're going to be using it to do the same thing over and over for a long time, because they change and we need to be aware of these changes, which can be really hard to keep track of, and we need to update how we work with it. One final limitation is sort of a actual limitation, and it is the limit on how much you can use the AI, right? Now, I know most students are more likely to use free versions of these tools, although I do recommend for most of you that you put a little bit of your budget aside to pay for the much better paid models. And one of the reasons is that you get more usage, right? So probably don't have to tell you, but free ChatGPT, you use it up to a certain level and then it says, oh, no, you have to wait, right? Or it says, here, we'll use this model, which is kind of smart, but not this one that is super smart, right? But even for those of us that pay for almost all AI tools, we still run into usage limits. It is not uncommon for me to spend some time working in Claude, and then it tells me that you're about to run out of messages for a while, come back after 3 o'clock, right? Which very much is a limitation, because I then have to go do something else for a while or use another tool, right? So there are limits to how much we can use these tools even when we pay for them.